the school to bring him on to speak sometime soon. And then Parminder will introduce himself, so I won't steal his thunder. Cool, thanks for doing that, guys.
Just in time for the IT to
we
be
didn't
working.
even plan.
Yeah, don't touch the screen whenever it's not working at all.
Okay, so I just put these slides together today. I've never given this presentation before, and I'd love your feedback afterwards, honest feedback to see how it goes. I thought, what would be a good way to talk about this topic, which I think Jay mentioned is like lessons learned, or as I like to call it, failure in single quotes. When you create a startup company, obviously one of the byproducts of that is you learn a lot. But anyone who tells you they do it for the learning experience is lying, because you don't. You do it for a successful outcome. And success can be defined a lot of different ways, and it should be. But when you start up your company, you're trying to win. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, how to explain failure by the capital vices. And business school is all about capitalism. Not all about it, but a lot about it. So we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins, and basically what to avoid as you go into your startup, or maybe some of you are already involved in a startup, which is great. You can probably teach me more than I can teach you. I'll tell you just very quickly about Whipcore, just so you know what it was, but we're not going to spend this time talking about the business. We can do that another time, or you can talk to me after if it's something that interests you. But Whipcore was a business that I co-founded with my business partner in 2009, and we launched the business to the public in April 2010. We were the world's first peer-to-peer car rental service. So you may be familiar with some buzzwords like these days called the sharing economy, or collaborative consumption, and many of you might know the service called Airbnb, which is something where you can kind of stay with in someone else's flat, either a flat share or just take over the flat, completely. And it's kind of this peer-to-peer lending phenomenon. So we did this for car rental, which was fraught with lots of challenges, as many startups, most startups, all startups are. And kind of it worked in some ways. Startup is defined in pretty much 2 ways if you're going to be really binary about it. You have to prove the concept, and then you have to prove that you can scale that concept. And we proved the concept, which in and of itself is an achievement. But going back to my original point, you get into startups to win, not to prove a concept. You prove your concept, you scale, and then kind of go to the beach. So we never really cracked that scaling, proving that we could scale. What we did prove and what we did accomplish is, again, we launched, we spread across the whole UK after launching in London. We got to a point where 90% of all Londoners were within a 10-minute walk of one of the cars that were listed on our platform. The way the service worked is you would essentially be a car owner or a car driver, i.e. renter, and you manage all the bookings through our platform. We insured every single rental based on a policy that we spent 1 year creating. Lloyd's of London. It was the first policy, only policy of its kind, essentially, transactional insurance policy that allowed you to legally rent out your car to someone else, and for that person to make money by renting out to someone in their neighborhood. So there were lots of nice milestones and achievements, but ultimately we got to a point almost a year ago today, in fact, where we shut the business because we cumulatively raised £3.5 million, which isn't an inconsequential amount of money, but it wasn't enough for the ambition that we had for our company. The market still wasn't, even after 3-4 years trading, wasn't quite ready for what we were trying to push out into the market. And I'll touch upon that a little bit in at least one of my slides. So again, that's all I'm going to say about the business for the talk, because we can maybe go into that another time if people are interested. But today we'll talk about the capital vices. Let's see. So in researching the 7 deadly sins, I came across this acronym, which is SALIGIA. It doesn't really roll off the tongue that well. that's the acronym. So I don't think there's enough vowels in the other side of the slide, which is how you probably know the 7 deadly sins, which is pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath or anger, and sloth. And then I came to learn that each of these 7 deadly sins is actually embodied by like an animal. So here we go. So you start with pride. It's symbolized by the vain peacock. What I wanted to say about this one is, again, as it says in the slide, don't underestimate how difficult it is to change behavior. As like kind of assertive MBA students and Sloans, you kind of think they can do anything, and quite often that's true. Like we're all like extremely skilled and privileged to be in this building and have be part of this greater network. But entrepreneurship isn't about your skills. A lot of it is about being at the right place and in the right time. The right place at the right time. And the stars kind of do need to align in a way for you to have success. What we were doing was definitely, people always ask, what is the biggest challenge for your business? And for us, the biggest challenge was we were trying to change people's behavior. Like it wasn't normal, it's still not normal today, to rent out your car and have someone else use it. It was conceptually a great idea. I thought that then. I still think it now. I think if I were going to start a business again today, the way we would implement things would be a bit different. And I see a sort of different vision for how that business would run. But at its core, the concept is still good. There are still people today trying to do it. And it was a business that I guess encouraged a lot of other people to do similar things in the broader space. But again, going back to this concept of pride, just don't underestimate this when you're looking at your own startups in terms of this life cycle. And having thought about this a lot, reflecting on the experience now that that part of it is over, I kind of came up with a lot of my own theories. And one of my theories is that, and again, this is something you guys might know, but there's 3 possible things that can happen when you start a company. And literally, it's just 3 things. And that's, you can IPO, you can have a trade sale, which is a company buying your company, or you will go bankrupt. And bankrupt is a caveat because you can have a solvent liquidation or you can have an insolvent liquidation. Obviously, it's preferable to have a solvent liquidation, but those are literally the only things that can happen. Anything else is not like a VC-backed type business. It's a lifestyle business. You'd be hard-pressed to get investment. So having this in mind, one of my things that I've been toying with is that IPOs are pretty rare. So let's just assume that doesn't happen. And the most probable thing is you're going to fail, unfortunately. But let's be positive and think that you're going to succeed. So that means you're going to have a trade sale. Then you need to look at the universe of people that are most likely to be your trade acquirers and try to figure out their innovation cycle. So for example, in the automobile industry, which is one of the most likely acquirers for the business that I had run, the innovation cycle is about 4 to 5 years. That's how long it takes from concept to design to production of a new vehicle because of all the safety tests and this and that. And if you use like the 1.5x multiplier on that, that means that a startup company is looking to get acquired by one of those companies needs to be in it for 5 to 7 years. So if that's like a correct barometer, an interesting theory, then you can see that us being around for 4 years wasn't quite long enough for the market to catch up and negotiate some sort of sale or whatnot. I haven't backed this up with any kind of statistical research. Maybe someday I might, or maybe one of you may experience a similar thing, but it sounds kind of right to me. And for sure, one of the things was we weren't in the market long enough, for one of those things to happen despite trying. I had lunch with the head of technology for Ford 2 months ago, and it was a meeting I was trying to set up for like 2 years. So I joked with him that this meeting's 2 years late. He could have bought my company. But that's the kind of stuff that happens when you're able to stay in a little bit longer. I'm taking a lot longer to go through these slides than I thought, so I apologize for that. All right, let's move on. So let's move on to greed. This one is kind of quick. this is probably something you've heard before, but what it means is do not get into entrepreneurship or starting a new business because you think it's a good money-making idea, because the answer is it's probably not. Getting into a startup is a big commitment. It has a uncanny way of unhealthily taking over your life, which I'll continue to address in some of the later slides. But again, just look at the stats. Everyone here is in business school. You know that most startups are going to fail. You know how hard it is to hire teams and to find the right talent and to get the right partnerships. I mean, it's pretty difficult. So, if you want to make money, focus on getting a job as an investment banker or get into sales and trading, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that is a better way to try to make money, not necessarily starting a company. We read a lot about overnight successes, but first of all, most of those companies have been around for a while, and second of all, an overnight success is definitely the exception, it's not the rule. So focus on doing stuff that you actually like. So that one is pretty related to I guess, lust. As entrepreneurs, you wanna win, and I myself said that's kind of why you get into it, and there's many ways, not necessarily to learn stuff. But of course you're learning every day, and it's fine to want a successful outcome and maybe to create $1 billion business, as they say, or whatever else. It's also perfectly fine to create a 100,000 per year turnover business. That's freaking hard to do. If you guys know how to do that, then you should be doing it right now. So just doing anything that provides value, I think, in my opinion, is worthwhile. But the most important thing is you want to focus on the process of doing that. And this is one thing that I was guilty of in my business, is that I was really enamored by the vision of the company and the fact that people could use cars in a different way, and it was changing the dynamic of a car from a product that someone bought and sold to a service that you would use when you needed it, right? Because you can kind of access that car whenever you needed it versus having to own it and hardly use it. But I was never passionate about car rental or that wasn't my dream to do that. And not everything has to be your childhood dream, but it should be something that you can get almost daily pleasure out of doing. And unfortunately that wasn't something that my business was for me. And I've made a commitment to myself that all the things I do from now on will. I've been dying to present at LBS with this kind of a slide, because if you haven't covered it yet, this is a case that you might get in leadership class, and there's some LBS professors called Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And they published this. I guess it was considered a seminal paper, probably in around 2005 at Harvard, where they kind of said this phrase, which is, don't try to emulate other people, just focus on being yourself, but with skill. And it's such a simple phrase, but it's really powerful if you take the time to think about what that means. It's not only is it a good thing to strive for, but it's almost like an eventuality. Regardless of how much you emulate someone else, you can't be anyone but yourself. So if you're going to be yourself, do it well. And the reason this is pertaining to envy is, as entrepreneurs, you often see the big shots or the Zuckerbergs, this and that, and those people they've worked hard. Most if not all of them, and they're also the beneficiary of some good fortune. But again, don't try to be the next Bill Gates. Don't try to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Just focus on doing something that you really like or love, and just do it well. Also part of this, which is worth noting, is share in other people's success. Be gracious in your applause of other people in your industry and your competitors, and then also be sincere when you give gratitude to people that help you along the way, because it's so hard to create something. smallest thing, can literally mean the difference between your company lasting another day or not. That's everything from an introduction to the person that brokers, a financing deal for you, or someone that puts you in touch with the person that becomes your next COO. Just keep all that stuff in mind. You can't do it by yourself. The next one, this is actually probably my future pet at some point. Well, it was going to be until I did some research and found out that these things actually grow to be about 50 or 60 pounds. So they actually are quite piggy, even though they look cute when you get them. So this is a teacup pig. It is an actual real thing, and you can make it with that if you want to. So gluttony. I'll tackle gluttony from two different ways, and that is the gluttony of people that you may get into bed with, such as like venture capitalists, and then also, I guess, maybe your own gluttony. We live in a world, or we see lots of news stories about X company, it just raised 10 million, or this company just raised 20 million, or 50 million, or 5 million, or 2 million. It doesn't matter, right? Like, financing is just a means to an end, and in fact, you want to raise as little as possible, and certainly on good terms. I mean, you don't want to make sure that your legals and your term sheet is structured well, but what never really gets talked about, even though if you go through it, and it's obvious, is the more you raise, the more indebted you are to your investors, and it means that you have a longer time period for your ability to exit that company, and or you have to exit at a higher multiple because they need to get their money back plus some. So raising more money is not necessarily a good thing, and often it's a bad thing, probably more often than it's given credit for. So just keep that in mind in terms of that sort of gluttonous mentality of we need more money, we need more money. The other thing, just it's worth mentioning, the VC, not all VCs are created equally. Another one of my maybe perhaps cockamamie theories is that VCs serve three purposes, and three purposes only. The first is to give you your initial capital so you can launch, and that's obviously imperative. The second is to provide connections to strategic partnerships, for example, and or talent. That's pretty important. And then the third is to provide access to follow-on capital. Literally, that's it. If they have industry expertise and this and that, that's a bonus. That's gravy. But those three things are the most important. And it's very important to structure things correctly. There's some people that raise money in their seed round, and they sign a bad deal, and it's literally, they don't realize it, but that's the death of the company. Because every deal you sign is going to send a signal to your future potential investors. The amount of, for example, employee option pools that you might have for employees could be negatively impacted by how you sign your first and subsequent deals. The lack of connections, for example, from your VC can be a killer, because you can't do everything as a founder. I mean, you pretty much have to do everything anyway. But if the VCs can't do, for example, that second thing that I said, then your job is going to be really hard. And then if they can't do number two, then it's probably likely that they can't do number three either, because it means they're not very well connected in either the industry or the greater ecosystem. So they're not going to help you get follow-on funding, and it actually sends a bad signal to say, oh, well, we don't know these guys who invest in this company. The company hasn't completely proven the kind of traction that we want, and we don't know the investors. I think I'm going to stay away. These are serious things you need to think of, especially in this environment in London and in Europe, which is a less developed ecosystem than the States. That's a whole other topic that we can get into another time. So that's enough for my future pet. Wrath. Wrath is a good one. So wrath is apparently manifested in the individual who spurns love and instead opts for fury. So as a founder of a business, you're essentially, the king or the queen, potentially. That's the perception. You're that's how these people are at least portrayed in the press, the ones that you read about or the ones that are perceived to be successful. But really, they say, you've probably heard, it's very lonely at the top. And that's really true, because when you're in that position, literally everyone else is your boss. You have to cater to your employees, you have to cater to your customers, you have to cater to your investors. And you really can do that effectively if you're not humble. And there's going to be so many different demands on your time. And it's very easy, even if you want to be that way, to not be that way, because we're just human at the end of the day. And if you're working 16 hours one day and someone asks you what you think is maybe a pointless question, it's pretty hard not to snap at that person. But it's something that you're not going to remember that reaction of yours the next day, but that person may remember it for years to come. And all these things really impact your reputation, as a founder. So it's a really hard job for that reason alone, because it's like being a politician. Actually, politicians get away with this stuff all the time. You have to be human, because people have a short memory and they remember. And once you become an entrepreneur and you raise capital, you become part of a very select group that has connections all over the world. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to meet people if you just have a little bit of hustle. Once you're part of the so-called club that raises venture capital. So again, treat that very sacredly. And then finally, 7 out of 7 is sloth, which bizarrely is embodied by a snail and not a sloth. I'm not sure who came up with these things, but someone please email them or tweet at them. This is the last but most important thing. And if you don't remember any of these slides, I'm going to send them to you, so just read the email. But if you remember just one, remember this one. Because it's the most important thing, and it's irrelevant to your actual business. You're not defined by your startup. It's really easy to lose balance when you're working so hard, and it's so easy to convince yourself that if you're not working 16 hours a day, there's no possible way your startup is going to work. Because the fact of the matter is it's probably not going to work. So you kind of train yourself in thinking that any bit of your free time, you should be focusing on it, because it would be irresponsible not to. And this is sort of like a slippery slope. And not everyone lands in this position, but it is easier than you think to get to that point. And there are some warning signs, right? You stop doing your hobbies. Maybe you start getting a bit physically unfit because you're not going to the gym enough or going running. One, you may neglect your partner, but if you don't have a partner, you might convince yourself that you don't have time for a boyfriend or a girlfriend. All those things are signs that basically you're imbalanced. And if you're imbalanced, not only is it bad for your health and your future kind of outlook, it's also bad for your business, because it means you're so laser focused that you're probably missing lots of big stuff, right? You've trained yourself to say, oh, well, yeah, I'm not sure about this, but this I'm definitely sure of, I'm definitely sure of. And maybe some of it you are sure of, but at the end of the day, nothing is sacred. And you sort of build up these ivory towers, I guess, as they call them, when you get into that mindset. And it's really dangerous. Some of you will start companies and you'll forget this, and then when you fail, you're going to fail pretty hard. When that happens to you, and I hope it doesn't, but if it does, feel free to email me or give me a call, and we can chat about it. I went through a really hard time last year, having had my business, that I spent 4 years into, kind of go away without a successful exit. And it was my own decision. We had $300,000 or emotional side of things. And when you're not a balanced person, you don't really have anything to latch onto, right? So, you know, if you have a wife or a husband, that person could support you. If you have kids, like, you know, hopefully nothing is more important than your kids. So you always have that in the back of your mind before you even get to the point of failure. You know, if you're like actively doing your hobbies and stuff, you're keeping that other part of you. But again, you know, as you start cutting those things out of your life, and then when an event like this happens, it could be, you know, really devastating. And then you just sort of have to pick up pieces, and it's not always that easy, you know, to do that. So definitely keep this in mind when you proceed with your business, which, despite all these slides, I recommend that you do. But do it with skill. And I think that I've taken up enough time. If you want to stay in touch, that's how you find me on Twitter. Anyway, I'm not going anywhere, so I'll talk to you after. But thank you.